MRAs should be, if you shut the fuck up and let me read my list, there's the fucking proof.
And so I obviously can't like argue that.
So.
You gotta be kidding me.
It all starts in 2014. Safe spaces, microaggressions, bias response teams, trigger warnings, all that.
The Black Lives Matter movement is bullshit.
At Berkeley, prosecutors can be seen lighting fires, tearing down barriers, and even throwing fireworks.
This person just spoke to me in a sexually harassing way. You're a garbage human.
Put your finger on problems, articulate what those problems are, solve them, and come to a consensus. And we risk losing that.
The entire skeptic community on YouTube are literally a bunch of fence-sitting fucking cowards that are too stupid and ignorant to take any position on any issue, so instead they try to nitpick and criticize the smallest inconsistencies on either side without even understanding what the inconsistencies really are. Holy fuck, the skeptic community on YouTube is fucking cancer.
Hello everyone, and welcome. Chapfi here. Today, I want to tell a story. The story of my cringy anti-SJW phase. But before we ascend into that, I first want to take this moment in the essay to explain the purpose of it all. I mean, is there really a need for a video like this one? 3 Arrows made a video like this, and then there's Xanderhal's How I Almost Became Alt-Right, and of course Innuendo Studios' How to Radicalize a Normie. And that's not even counting all the other videos by less popular BradTubers talking about their cringy anti-SJW phase. So, what's the point of this video? Is it just gonna be another video about how anti-SJW suck, and people like ContraPoints, H-Bomber Guy, and Philosophy Tube are amazing? No. See, I like to think that each of these 3 videos serves a different purpose. A different approach on the notorious anti-SJW rabbit hole to help us better understand how it works and what would compel someone to go into it. And most importantly, how to escape it. 3 Arrows video explains the algorithmic aspect. Xanderhal gives us his anecdotal experience, and Innuendo Studios explains how the people on the other side of the wormhole intentionally or unintentionally radicalize its potential new members. But what side of the anti-SJW wormhole does this video break down? Well, even though I'm just explaining my experience, I hope to be able to explain the psychology as to why someone would become an anti-SJW, and show how there's something inherently childlike to anti-SJW culture, and how a lack of maturity can actually be the biggest factor as to why someone would become an anti-SJW. So I thought, why not make a video telling you guys about my political journey? So before we begin, let me first structure this video. First, I will be explaining the rise of the anti-SJW community and the landscape they paved. A dangerous, trapping landscape, if you may. Some make it out, some don't. So, let me first tell you guys a story about a cat. A story about corrupted innocence, disconnect from the world, and at last, finding your way back to the light. Once upon a time, there was a big forest. And to those who had never seen the forest, it was shockingly beautiful. As it was to a certain cat, who was born and spent most of his time in the also beautiful but not equally as much desert. The cat sometimes got slight glimpses of the forest, but never really stepped foot in it. Until one day, his curiosity got the best of him. The forest was beautiful, of course, but it wasn't perfect, as it had fallen victim to a huge war that once took place in it, leaving some scars to part of its ground. And the curious cat exploring the forest he had recently discovered inevitably checked out the big puddle of nasty quicksand that was left behind. And of course, he got trapped. And he started sinking, and his vision became blurrier and blurrier, until he was completely shielded from any speck of light from the real world. He was now completely blind. But then the quicksand released him, and he could feel the ground again. But it was a different ground. It didn't feel the same. There was no grass, and the only light came from the fires within. The cat was trapped in a rabbit hole, a maze-like rabbit hole, and now it was up to the cat to find his way out of this rabbit hole. Would he follow the light and go deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole and eventually get swallowed by the fire, or would he avoid the light and find his way out of this rabbit hole? This is a story of how curiosity almost made this cat alt-right. But right now, I first want to get over defining what an anti-SJW is. And to do that, we first need to go over what an SJW is. SJW stands for Social Justice Warrior, which is a pejorative term for anyone who promotes socially progressive views, including feminism, civil rights, and multiculturalism. The accusation that somebody is an SJW carries implications that they are pursuing personal validation rather than any deep-seated conviction and are engaging in disingenuous arguments. Or, as Urban Dictionary puts it, the overly offended, blindly ignorant scum of the internet who report anything and everything that offends them. So, an anti-SJW must be someone who's against all those things, right? Well, yes and no. An anti-SJW could be someone who is not against things like feminism, multiculturalism, and civil rights, but just hates people who are pursuing a personal validation rather than any deep-seated conviction and are engaging in disingenuous arguments. But it could also be someone who's against all those three listed things, but still managed to be, blindly ignorant scum of the internet whom report anything and everything that offends them. They are also commonly referred to as the skeptic community, but this label also gets tricky from my understanding, because not every skeptic YouTuber is an anti-SJW, and a lot of times these guys actually hate anti-SJWs. But from what I've seen, the people dominating the skeptic community are still largely anti-SJWs. But now you may be wondering, what is the skeptic community? Well, most of them got their name as what they started out as, the YouTube atheist community. See, when YouTube was created, I'm going back really far with this, there were a lot of Christians who realized that they could use the platform to their advantage. But with a community as big as the Christian community, there is bound to be a community that counters their supposed evidence for God. Simply put, the Christians made claims supporting the existence of God, and a lot of other YouTuber commentators were skeptical of those claims, branding them the skeptic community, and this community blew up. How? Well, Big Jewel did a great job of explaining this.
The Amazing Atheist looks at his audience. He makes jokes and seems at ease on the platform. These guys feel like they're talking to no one, like their videos are not meant to be engaged with.
Does the Bible give place to the possibility that God will ultimately be successful in drawing absolutely everybody to faith in Christ?
They upload lectures and home movies. The Amazing Atheist produces content. And that is a fun situation to be in, I think. There is an ideological enemy out there, and there is ample proof that they are real and influential and saying harmful stuff, but that enemy is somewhere else. And here, in this internet enclave, this guy and his audience get to be the strong ones.
But then Atheism Plus happened. A strong flood of feminism found its way into the skeptic community. This was largely due to the progressive nature of atheism when compared to its opponent, Christianity. A lot of these Christians took very regressive traditional positions. They were against things like gay marriage and abortion, things that feminists a lot of times were fighting for. And Christians a lot of times actually argued against things like women's rights within their video. And since the skeptics were already critiquing traditional Christian values, it was inevitable that they soon found themselves arguing in favor of progressive feminist talking points. So it only made sense for the online feminists to team up with the online skeptics. But then Gamergate happened. And this is where feminists and atheists actually clashed. See, Christians had a habit of taking a stance against video games, branding them as satanic. And a lot of news outlets that were known for being very traditional and right-wing often claimed that video games caused violence. And that only made sense, since a belief that is very popular amongst the right is being pro-gun. These right-wing outlets needed a scapegoat to shift the blame off of guns. Safe to say that the traditional, often Christian right-wing and the gaming community didn't go together very well. And with games often being branded as satanic by Christians, atheists found themselves in a position where they defended video games as well. The points that the Christians made to criticize games were often very ludicrous to the atheist community. This sorta got them used to the idea of video games being attacked for stupid reasons. So when feminists were attacking video games for being sexist and misogynistic, this kind of exposed a more extreme side of feminism that the skeptic community wasn't used to. So now they were kinda left with a choice: defend feminism or defend video games. Some chose feminism, some chose video games, and I'm sure there were also some who chose both. And the reasons feminists had for critiquing these games were a lot of times invalid and sometimes also valid. But with the oversensitive and easily offended nature of Christians now carrying over into radical online feminists, making fun of that was nothing that the skeptic community wasn't already used to. And soon enough, the skeptic community found a new target: feminists.
Feminists, atheists, currently they're separate. All is relatively calm, drama isn't much. That's about to go away. Feminism infiltrates. Say hello to Atheism Plus. Thunderfoot DJ, blacklisted for heresy. Oversensitivity strangles the community. PC Maya, slave state, Aaron Ryan, Jen McRae. Tumblrism, feminism, star of elevator gay.
Feminists and skeptics were now going at each other constantly, and making fun of feminists became more and more popular. This motivated skeptics to start looking for clips of feminists to make fun of, like they did with the Christians. So more clips of feminists started to pop up on the internet. These clips range from feminists making terrible criticisms of games and sometimes just society as a whole, to clips of feminists acting crazy in public. And with meme culture being bigger than ever, these clips were very quickly to get memed. I think we've all seen the clips before, right? Trigglypuff, the red-haired feminist, and the one that kicked the pro-life sign. And so they caught the attention of bigger, non-skeptic creators such as Filthy Frank, iDubbbz, and of course Leafy. This is where I come in. At the time I was 15, and at this moment in time it's important to clarify that I had a very confused and weird understanding of what feminism was. I think it had something to do with some weird creepy guy named David, I think, making some claims about feminists thinking women deserve more rights than men. Yeah, looking back, the video was full of unsubstantiated claims and non sequiturs, but that's neither here or there. Because right now, we're talking about Leafy. But this did cause me to have a very warped understanding of what feminism was. In fact, you could even say I straight up didn't have the slightest idea of what it was. I thought sexism was discrimination exclusively against women, and that feminism was discrimination exclusively against men. The last one sounds especially ludicrous, since feminism is literally a movement, and I didn't know that. Later on I brought this up to my dad, and he told me that sexism was like discrimination based on sex, and that feminism was a movement against that. So that led me to think of feminism as a good thing. So when I saw the title of that Leafy video, I was confused. Why is he making fun of feminists? What's wrong with feminism? So when I watched the video, it was sort of my first encounter with a man-hating feminist, whether that person really hated men or not. And watching the video back, I can see why I liked it. It was made for kids.
Because when I put on the quote-unquote empowering metallic bikini of your favorite video game character and walk the convention floor, men touch me without asking.
Oh yeah, fucking right. No one wants to touch you. You look like a mole rat from Fallout 3.
I mean, Leafy may have not have made it for kids, but from the ad-homs and the talking like he's drunk, it's clear what this would appeal to.
I am the feminist who is out to ruin your life.
Oh, that's great to know. I swear to God, this bitch looks like a teacher that for the past 35 years, she's done everything right. And on her 36th birthday, she just snapped. Rushed out to her shitty pickup truck that she secretly hates, but bought it to show that she's a strong individual. Drove down to the fucking gun store, bought a gun, threw away the gun, bought a monster truck, and started running over little kids with dicks on the side of the road, while throwing rotten fruit at them, while repeating this line over and over.
But when I saw clips of the supposed crazy feminist, I kind of got triggered. If you don't take into account what poetry slams are and the satirical nature of these, it can very much serve as fear-mongering. I am the feminist that's out to ruin your life. Oh shit, not my life. And I think that made my mind go internally into defensive mode. Yeah, I'm going in deep with this, I know. And I think that may have internally stuck with me. Leafy went on to make more videos making fun of feminists, making the easiest arguments that even a 14-year-old could make, and I kept being a fan of him, until the Leafy content got. A video that I think contributed greatly to me actually escaping the anti-SJW rabbit hole, but I'll elaborate more on that later. Now, I was an IDOPS fan, and IDOPS was a lot different from Leafy. I guess you could say he never really made videos making fun of SJWs. There was a reason why he was in compilations that collected the moments where he more so criticized things that could be related to social justice. Because he made no videos dedicated to doing that. The only videos where he did do that was in the Kickstarter crap, a feminist photo book, and Indiegogo excrement $2,000 SJW laptop. But those are literally 2 videos, and there are no videos where it was as obvious as in Leafy's videos. But he still had a very edgy sense of humor that he openly expressed in his videos, driving away the more progressive audiences and pulling in the more edgy people to his channel that may be identified more conservative. We've seen evidence of this in the latest drama that IDOPS got himself in. But with IDOP's more edgy sense of humor, he was bound to get into some trouble. And then came the video that started it all, the Tana Mojo Content Con. Now, I'm going off of purely my memory here, so bear with me. This was the first time I had ever heard of the taking the power away from the word argument. And it came as such a shock to me that I didn't question anything about it, because all that was in my mind was, Wow, I never thought about it that way. But a lot of people made videos on this topic, and thanks to YouTube's algorithm, the first video I watched on the topic was from Pyrocynical before the content cop was even posted. So I was recommended videos from a ton of YouTubers, all on the same topic. But only one stuck out to me. This one was different from all the other ones, not because of the contents of the video, but because of something about the person in it. This was also how I discovered my first real anti-SJW. Some black guy. Now, I had already seen the reaction to the IDOPS vs Stana drama from people that happened to be black, but this one was different. Some black guy was defending IDOPS. IDOPS, a YouTuber who I liked and naturally took the side of. But I think the thing that also made me want to subscribe to Derek was the fact that I wasn't into the YouTuber community for that long. I only started watching YouTubers from my own country in 2013, and English-speaking YouTubers in 2015, starting with Smosh, and eventually commentary channels in 2016, starting with Leafy. I wasn't subscribed to many black YouTubers, so if I found one that I liked, I subscribed. But by now, I entered the anti-SJW community, and I went on to discover many more creators in it, becoming more and more invested into it. The reason why I'm so passionate about the story and find it so interesting is because when I was a child, I was at heart already kind of a progressive person. So that's why it would look strange if you took my opinions on social issues from 12-year-old me and compared them to the people who I was getting my political opinions from in 2017. For example, I think what initially made anti-SJW content and arguments appeal to me was because I was learning something from them. Or at least I thought I was. To put it in the nerdiest way possible, they distributed information to me. And most importantly, unlike school, they did it in an entertaining way. So that made it easier for me to listen to it. I think the biggest thing that I liked about the anti-SJW community was their perspective. Mostly their perspective on racism. As a child, I was pretty fascinated with the world. Granted, I mostly used my own imagination to keep me busy, but the things I imagined were always based on what I saw in the real world, obviously. What I'm getting at is that I was already interested in the social structure of the world at a very early age. One of those things being the way we treat each other. Maybe this goes without saying, but I always disliked the idea of treating someone poorly based on superficial factors about them, such as gender, sexuality, and race. So when my parents taught me about racism and slavery, I was pretty horrified. I always knew I hated racism because we are all part of the human race. You don't know someone based on his or her skin color, and black people don't choose to be black. So if you hate someone because of the color of their skin, there's literally nothing they can do about it. I grew up believing that racism was the act of discrimination based on race, and I still believe that to this day. Although now I believe that there's more to it than just that, because that would set the bar very low. Nevertheless, the phrase black people can't be racist, or better yet, you can't be racist against white people, is one that I'm sure made not just me, but thousands of other people become anti-SJW. It's honestly a dangerous phrase, and I don't recommend anyone uses it regardless of your reasons. As much as hearing the phrase "you can't be racist against white people" is a terrible reason to find closure in a movement full of menos, grifters, and extremists, I can't really blame the anti-SJW youth for doing it. When someone says you can't be racist against white people and you yourself are white, it sounds like they are justifying discrimination based on something that you have no control over. When I was a child, I never really thought about the concept of racist black people, because to my interpretation there was no such thing. Not because I thought it was impossible, but because I just never saw it happening. To my underdeveloped brain, black people were always the victims of racism. In my eyes, they wouldn't be racist because they would know what it's like to be on the receiving end of it. But that image shattered very quickly once Black Lives Matter started to surface. All of a sudden, clips of black people being racist against white people started to surface on the internet, mostly under the category Black Lives Matter. So now my brain had taken the movement Black Lives Matter and associated it with black people saying stuff like pigs in the blankets, grill 'em like bacon, what do we want, dead cops, when do we want them now, or it's open season everyone, I'm gonna kill some white people, hopefully some white cops as well. Honestly, that last one was kind of funny. Oh come on, if you claim to have an edgy sense of humor, you gotta admit that last one was at least kind of funny. Anyway, it may not seem like that big of a deal, but people are a product of their environment. And when you're a socially awkward, introverted white boy who doesn't have that much interaction with people of color, or especially black people, and most importantly you don't have any political conversations with people in the real world in your life, because 1, fear of confrontation, and 2, that the people you get your information from are far more legit than any person in your social life could ever be, you get a recipe for disaster. Even if you don't want to be racist, if that's the kind of content you consume combined with an inhibited lifestyle, who knows? If your life looks anything like how mine did about 3 years ago, and you don't really do anything exiting, you just sit inside all day watching videos, and your school isn't teaching you anything interesting or most importantly new, and you never take any kind of challenge, you develop an almost concrete comfort zone that's really hard to break out of. And if your comfort zone even extends into the online world, where you've already grown accustomed to a certain type of content that's building your worldview, and you refuse to consume anything that challenges that worldview, what that would mean for someone like me is that I just keep digging deeper and deeper until I dug too deep. 2017 was probably the core of my anti-SJW phase, and the point where the cat was walking through the root of the maze-like rabbit hole, as far away from the exit and as close to the bottom pit as he had ever gotten. I was watching YouTubers like Chris Reagan, Sargon of Akkad, Shoeonhead and Hunter Avila, but I was also watching more radical people such as Paul Joseph Watson, Lauren Southern, and even Andy Worski to a certain extent. I remember watching this video from Chris Reagan about a drama he was in involving Francesca Ramsey from MTV Decoded. And she was claiming that someone from the anti-SJW community said that gays don't deserve rights. And Chris, wrapped in a green screen, asked, "Which one of us said that again?" And he started listing off a bunch of anti-SJW YouTubers who I happen to be a fan of. And then he said,
"Oh yeah, it was none of us. Of us.
That word, us. The moment I heard that, I realized that there was a community. It felt good knowing that a lot of the creators I watched were friends and often also collaborated. But also to know that the anti-SJW community was something that I was a part of. Because even though I didn't make any anti-SJW videos at the time, I still considered myself an anti-SJW, because how can you not be against SJWs? In my mind, they were the worst people on the planet. Not opposing this somewhat vague concept was in my mind immoral. But this community made me feel some type of camaraderie. But in reality, all it did was give an us versus them mentality. This rabbit hole became bigger and bigger, as the larger YouTubers who weren't even in this community but who I did happen to be a fan of dipped their toes into the filthy anti-SJW water. People like Pyrocynical, H3H3, Filthy Frank and even PewDiePie to a certain extent. In fact, the word SJW went from being a silly pejorative to being an accusation, an attack on someone's character, creating a virtual fight with SJWs. An internet war. Very quickly this wasn't just comedy anymore. No. Anti-social justice became social justice. And barely anyone knew, especially the anti-SJW community, had no idea in what direction they had shifted their community into. The accusation that someone would be an anti-SJW would soon be something that made the anti-SJW community eat their own. Enough was just never enough. If an anti-SJW YouTuber said something even remotely progressive, they'd get a shitstorm sent after them. I remember this one anti-SJW YouTuber, Miss Misa, who would literally get called an SJW if she hadn't said or tweeted something about how SJWs were evil in the last 2 weeks or something. It started becoming a competition of who could be the least SJW, and if you refused to participate, you'd get kicked in the dust. In me, this awoke a desire to go further in my fight with SJWs. Much further. I didn't just dislike SJWs anymore, I hated them. But who were the SJWs? Feminists and Black Lives Matter, especially Black Lives Matter. They were the enemy. The focus would later go from Black Lives Matter to feminism, but we'll get to that later. Now we enter the Black Lives Matter arc, in which a black man almost made me hate black people. See, as a white boy growing up in the suburbs, I really understood nothing about black people's struggle, so people's anger towards society seemed unjust to me. I mean, school certainly wasn't teaching me about the drug war or generational poverty or the racist undertones of capitalism. As far as I was aware, I had never even heard of those things. I had to learn about those things through YouTubers. But that only happened years later. So to me, watching a black person talk about how I was justified in my anger towards Black Lives Matter felt good. It felt like validity to my argument. But soon enough, some black eye videos just became not enough. I wanted more. Then I heard of a YouTuber named Tommy Sotomayor, through YouTuber Blasphemous HD, who described him as a self-hating black YouTuber. And that took me by surprise. A black person who hates himself? I had never heard of that before. What the anti-SJWs taught me was that it was the white people who hated themselves. I mean, at this point I had seen about countless examples of it, and it didn't really matter if they really hated their own race or not, because in my interpretation they did. So obviously I got curious, and the biggest question in my mind that just needed answering was, did he really hate himself? But I think the biggest psychological reason for me was from all the self-hating white people who indirectly told me that I should hate my own race as well. A black person who hates himself would become a breath of fresh air. But the question, did this black person really hate himself, still needed an answer. So I went to his YouTube channel, and I looked for a video from him on the subject, and I did find one. I can't quite remember the title of the video, but I somewhat remember the contents. He was talking about how should he have to like black people if black people don't even like him. His evidence for this being that when he lived in a black neighborhood, black people stole from him, but when he moved to a white neighborhood, he left his stuff in the front yard and his white neighbor knocked on his door to tell him. That was sort of the general consensus of the video. I can't remember a lot because it has been a long time since I've seen his videos, and they've all been deleted. But I'll try my best to go off what I do know. But that video led me to believe that Tommy had been unfairly scrutinized. And he didn't really hate his own race. If anything, his own race hated him. I quickly became a fan of his. And as much as I back then would have denied it, I just wanted to see a black person complain about the black community. Because that's what my brain had grown to like. See, for me it was just Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter is a phrase, not a physical thing. You can't imagine it. So when I watched videos making fun of Black Lives Matter, my brain just saw black people. It saw a black person criticizing black people. And so that is what it had grown to like. So I started watching more of his videos, and I can remember especially that he mostly had a problem with black women. He would repeatedly call them sluts and whores. But at this point I was already a fan of him, and the more I got into his videos, things soon started getting a lot darker. He started talking about how police brutality was justified because black people, being 13% of the population, commit 50% of the crime. And at one point he even compared black people to dangerous animals, saying that if he encountered a rattlesnake, and he got bitten, he wouldn't give the next rattlesnake the benefit of the doubt. And therefore, it's totally fair for police to judge black people on the color of their skin. He also opened the video with a title card saying something along the lines of "Don't ever ask me why I don't respect these black bitches and N-words again." And it got worse. I remember this one really creepy rant from him, talking about how white people had Neanderthal blood, and that if black people kept attacking the white man, the Neanderthal in them would soon snap and fight back. Surprisingly, this is not when I snapped out of it. That would only happen later on, and we'll get to that. One day I stumbled upon a video from him accusing one of my favorite anti-SJW YouTubers of racism, this being TJ Kirk. He showed clips of TJ and his friends reacting to Tommy while doing racist Ebonic accents, talking about watermelon. That basically convinced me that TJ was racist, but when I saw TJ's video, and I realized that Tommy took him out of context, and that he was being a weaselly little liar dude. I'll leave TJ's video in the description for context, because I really don't want to harp on to that too much. But it is safe to say that I stopped being a fan of Tommy at that point. Maybe not for the right reasons, but at least I wasn't getting indoctrinated by his bullshit anymore. Anyway, this didn't snap me out of the anti-SJW community though. I was still very much an anti-SJW. And I continue to watch anti-SJW content. I'm sure there were some more anti-SJW dramas that I can't remember, although there is one thing that I do remember. The anti-SJW community was still eating their own, and there was a race to be the biggest anti-SJW, and mentally, I was participant. And the race was headed towards a certain someone now. Who were the anti-SJWs going to cancel for not being enough of an anti-SJW? Well, let's just say that I was quite surprised when it turned out to be some black guy. A video popped up in my recommended, entitled "The Skeptics Community's Racist Attacks on Tree of Logic," in brackets, "Some black guy helps." I'm gonna need you to hold on right now, because now we're gonna fully insert ourselves into 60-year-old me. And watch this video from his perspective. Now, obviously we're not gonna go over the whole video as it's 46 fucking minutes long, just a consensus of it.
Hey everybody, what's up fam? This is Tree from treeoflogic.com. What if I told you that my white friend Rage After Storm was viciously attacked by the skeptic community for uploading a video about race realism?
Oh, really? I don't know what race realism is, but sure.
On June the 25th, Rage uploaded a video called "Race is Real." I watched the video, hit the like button, and then went on about my day. 3 days later, I began to receive comments on my YouTube channel asking me about my opinion in reference to Rage's video. Before answering these comments, I went to Twitter to see what was going on. Here's what went down. Derek, aka Some Black Guy, was outraged when he saw Rage's video and bashed her on Twitter by calling her a racist.
Wow, that sounds unlike him.
I could not understand why they were so furious with science and statistics.
It's science?
These irrational people gathered together for a live stream to attack Rage. They so-called debunked her video by focusing on a citation that she used from the Daily Stormer and called her various names, including Nazi and racist.
That sounds like something SJWs would do.
When I clicked on my notification, the entire page was filled with my Twitter followers telling me that Derek called me a coon.
No! That's hypocritical of Derek. He's been called a coon himself, and he made fun of people who called him that.
Hey, what's going on, man?
You look like a coon.
I feel bad for this girl now.
I shared that because I was so shocked that a strong black woman like yourself saw this video that claims that black people are genetically inferior and you saw nothing wrong with it.
What? Did she really say that? What a bunch of triggered snowflakes. Did that girl Rage After Storm really say that black people were inferior? Now I'm curious. What was her video called again? Race is Real or something?
So, after many of you have speculated about my stance on race, especially my recent one, I've decided to make a video about it. Because heck, I love talking about things that will probably get me kicked off YouTube and every other social media website. Racism, it's an interesting lexeme. I remember being first taught about it when I was a wee little kid, and we were talking about the slave trade, you know, in Africa and all that other shit. So at the time, I only saw racism as a thing that white people did to black people. Despite the fact that I as a kid was racially profiled for being German, for example, I got called a Nazi on the playground, etc., I never actually assumed that that was a case of racism. I just thought, heck, that's just people being assholes, right? Which then gives me another question to whether or not the term racism actually properly exists. They are used to force people to ignore why we might feel uneasy about people that look or are a little bit different. About 13% of Americans are black. Black offenders committed 52% of homicides. Is it the unfair justice system? You guys like to say that, but it's not. In the book of IQ and the Wealth of Nations, it talks about the IQ of the average sub-Saharan African being at 80. The IQ of an African American is normally at 85. However, it is a fact that wherever black people are concentrated in large numbers in the West, they are likely to promote tribal situations, such as gangs, territories, and fights. But for some reason, it is still our fault as white people. On average, densely populated black communities show a thirst for tribal mentality, as well as tribal warfare, because it is still white people to blame for a problem that is predominantly genetic.
Oh, now I get it. She didn't say that black people were genetically inferior. She just alluded to it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when the cat dipped his paw in the fire and burned himself. The cat realized where the light had led him, and it hurt. He may have gotten himself burned, but at last, a cat has 9 lives. And if you count the quicksand, he still had 7 left. The cat turned his back to the fire and ran as quick away from it as possible. Now he just needed to continue with his mission to make it out of the hole. Would he succeed in making it out of the hole without losing all the 7 lives he had left, or would he undergo the same tragic fate as the other creatures who got trapped in the same hole and unfortunately didn't make it out? Back to Rage. In leftism, we like to call this a moment where the mask slips. And slip it did. Even reactionary 16-year-old me could see right through her bullshit. Now, things made much more sense to me. Why Tree of Logic didn't go over the actual criticisms of the contents of Rage's video and just dismissed it as them talking about the Daily Stormer. And why she acted clueless when Derek brought up the most important part about Rage's video. And why she refused to watch Petty Politics' video debunking Rage After Storm. And most of all, why the skeptic community were calling Rage a racist Nazi. At this point, I felt lied to. And in a way, I was. So what now? Did I lay off the anti-SJW community for a while, realizing that there were some serious fucked up people in it? No. I went back to watching the skeptic YouTubers as they were clearly right in the situation. But this didn't mean I was no longer susceptible to race realist ideology. When I heard Rage basically imply that black people, no matter where they were genetically dispositioned to be violent, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know why. I didn't have any arguments for it. Or at least not yet. But this meant I couldn't argue against it, making me an incredibly vulnerable target for white supremacist recruiting tactics.